snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is the first one in the Faithful and the Fallen series. This is by John Gwynne and it's called Malice. I read this as a buddy read with Will, who has a blog that I will link down below, and Michael, who is from Bitten by a Radioactive Book, and I really enjoyed this. But I wasn't sure if I was going to or not, because it's actually very classic fantasy and there's a lot of tropes within this. When I first saw this book, I really loved the cover. I think the cover of this book is really beautiful, but the cover was what initially drew me to it, and then I found out that there were giants in it, and that sounded really cool because I've not read a lot of stuff with giants. And then I started reading it, and it has a really interesting beginning. It was definitely easy to get sucked into it, but there's a lot of Christian themes within this book. There's a lot of references to kind of similar things to the Bible, like heaven and hell and angels and demons. There's a lot of stuff very similar to that in this book. There's a lot of tropes that are used and employed regularly throughout this book. We've got like the young boy who's kind of doing a coming of age story. We've got the girl who wants to be able to fight and can't. There's a lot of storylines that go on that are very classic fantasy within this. But with that said, it's really well written and it's really readable. It doesn't feel like a rehashing of everyone else's story. It still feels as though it has its own storyline and it wants you to kind of keep reading and find out what's going to happen. So I really enjoyed this, despite the fact that it did use an awful lot of sort of Christian themes and symbology and a lot of very tropey stuff. This is a debut fantasy novel, and it actually reads really well for a debut. It was really easy to get into. It's filled with a lot of classic fantasy elements. We have prophecy, we've got betrayal, we've got preordained heroes, and we've got a lot of fighting for the throne or fighting over the throne and things like that. It also references a lot of religion. As I say, Christianity mainly, with devils and angels. And the whole story sort of revolves around this idea of a god war that is coming, and we need to get ready for it. Humanity as a whole has to get ready for the god war that has been destined to come for a long time. So yeah, that's basically the overall idea of the story. We have a couple of main characters that we follow whilst reading this. One of the main ones is Corbin, who is a young boy who lives with his mother and father, but when we meet him he's getting bullied, and he's the sort of typical trying to grow up and overcome the bullying and sort of grow into his own person. That storyline is Corbin's, so it is very typical, but I really enjoyed him as a character. I felt like his storyline was easy to get into, obviously because we've read it a couple times before in other fantasies. We've seen the young boy with the story where he has to overcome stuff, but it was still done in its own way, and I enjoyed seeing how Corbin dealt with the bullies and he sort of grew up and overcome these things that he was facing. He was also quite a fun character, and I felt like I could sympathise with him, and he certainly felt like he grew a lot more over the story than some of the other characters, so that was good. Then we have Cywin. Cywin is Corbin's sister. She is the typical girl who wishes to be a boy. She wants to fight, she wants to learn how to do the fighting and be along with the boys, and she's always been friends with Corbin and his friends, so she wants to be one of their group and she wants to fight and sort of be in control of her own life. But of course, in this society, you know, females are expected to do what they're expected to do. They're not expected to fight. I like the fact that from her point of view we get to see how she thinks about Corbin and what she thinks of him and the actions that he takes in the book. That was really nice, and I felt like that was a really nice element. I also like the fact that they are siblings who get on really well and they spend a lot of time together. It was really refreshing to see that, so that was nice. Varadis' story is pretty interesting. It definitely focuses a lot on politics. He is a young knight who's part of a war band that he's just joined up with. He wants to kind of prove himself. He wants to prove to his father and his older brother that he can fight in a war and fight in the war band and be a really good asset to the family, because he's always felt a little bit overshadowed by his older brothers. He's kind, he's nice, he's sweet, he's a good character, he's a really loyal character, loyal to a fault potentially. He definitely has the tendency to choose one person to be loyal to, whether they're good or not, and that does get tested a little bit later on into the story, and I feel like that's something that will be developed further. His storyline was really interesting because I felt like he was right in the centre of a lot of the story, and he definitely was in the know of a lot of things. He's trusted with a lot of stuff that I found really interesting. His storyline was definitely one of the more intriguing and one of the more exciting, because I've always felt like I knew what was coming next with him, but then other stuff would happen. Yeah, really enjoyed him. I also like the characters of Edina and Gar. Edina is a princess, a young princess who lives in the same village as Corbin. Her family rule over them, and she's actually a really down-to-earth person. I like the fact that the princess sort of socialised with the village children, and she enjoyed that and she was happy about that, and she didn't look down on them. That was nice. Then we have Gar, who is the Sable Master with the mysterious background that we don't know a lot about, but he's sort of like the protector or guardian for Corbin, and he and Corbin develop a really nice relationship. Gar's definitely one of the more interesting characters for sure, because we don't know a lot about him, and over the course of the story we get little hints at what he could be or who he used to be, but we don't know for sure. So I really enjoyed his story, and I felt like that was one of the better bits. The world building for this, again, really classic fantasy. It's a kind of medieval world, but there are tribes which we see and there are giants which we see, so that's a little bit of a twist on kind of the typical fantasy, but it is fairly typical on the whole. Overall, it's really weird for me to say this because I feel like all of the elements within it aren't that interesting as a whole. Like, all of them are things I've seen before, but it was just done in a really good way. It was really refreshing and fun to just read a classic fantasy again and feel good in a world that was classic fantasy, even with all the tropes that it employed, even with the kind of references to Christianity. I still felt like it was a really fun and refreshing read, so that definitely shows the skill of John Gwynne to be able to take classic fantasy, which has been a genre for a very long time since Tolkien, and give it something new and give it something a little bit fresh and still make it feel really fun and exciting to read. So I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I do have the second book already, which we are planning to read next month. So I'm very excited to continue on with this series, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where John Gwynne takes it next, because the ending was definitely exciting. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you guys have read this, let me know what you thought. Did you feel like it was really tropey? If so, was that a bad thing? Was it a good thing? Did you like the writing? Or are you interested in picking this one up? Let me know down below. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat.